I just wanted to introduce our next speaker, Brian Halstead. Brian has been a very long-term campaigner on this issue, starting with Save Our Councils before the amalgamation, when the forced amalgamation was mooted. And he's continued on all those years, and he's done a sterling job in helping us in the Inner West, and he's doing a sterling job in the Demerge NSW Alliance right now. So I'd like to hand it over to Brian.
Thanks, Pete. I'm Brian Halstead. I'm an accountant, been on council audit committees, been fighting against mergers for 10 years, and now part of Demerge NSW Alliance, and we represent communities across the state that are fighting to put the local back into local government. You are not alone in this strong desire to get your council back, get proper representation and community input, and control where the money is spent and on what. We have members in Bombala, Snowy Valleys, Cootamundra-Gundagai, Guyra, the Central Coast where Jane comes from, Pittwater, Canterbury Bankstown, Hilltops, and of course yourselves, all striving to get their councils back. We will not give up.
Hooray!
The Labor Party promised to give communities their say and then respect their opinion. I have documents here from 2017 with Peter Primrose promising that, Greg Warren promising that, the Labor Party conference just before the election stating they would legislate to enable a plebiscite or poll. Now, the Labor Minister has told the people of Cootamundra-Gundagai that he cannot implement the decision of the previous government that approved deamalgamation. He has so far refused to change legislation that is required and is making the community go through a third Boundaries Commission inquiry. And that is an absolute disgrace. And then he will not necessarily approve the result. I just encourage you to go and look and read the Boundaries Commission report into Cootamundra-Gundagai. You can see the social and physical impact of this amalgamation. They've had trouble, the doctors have had trouble, the staff have had trouble, and it's well worth reading. You can see what mergers have done to those small communities, and they're fighting hard to get their community back. So much for the party respecting communities, but rather appearing to trash their own policies. Now, we expect the Labor Party to follow their policies and to support the legislative change that you've heard from Amanda. Likewise, the opposition should respect local democracy, not necessarily supporting deamalgamation, but the opposition can support giving communities a say. A senior minister in the last government admitted that amalgamation was the worst policy of that government. Here is a chance for the opposition to respect democracy, and we've seen the crossbenchers are supporting it, and now is a chance for the opposition to do so as well. Now, I'm seeing local opposition members who may be vulnerable to a teal attack to get them to support the bill. I'm happy to go with you to a local Labor or Liberal members of Parliament to discuss support for Amanda's bill. We need their support, and see me afterwards, and I'm happy to go with you to speak to the members of Parliament, because we need their support to get this bill through. Before the plebiscite goes to the community, the legislation proposes the community be fully informed on the costs using a standard methodology prepared by the Office of Local Government, with community input for a for and against case. You may have heard about the costs of one-off costs of amalgamation. I've studied the Boundaries Commission reports into Cootamundra-Gundagai, Snowy Valleys. I've reviewed the reports of Queensland's successful deamalgamations, and I've been through the Inner West and Canterbury Bankstown proposals. The small Queensland deamalgamations of similar size to the Cootamundra had a cost between $1.8 and $4 million. The report in Snowy Valley said the cost would be about $3.7 and $5 million, with the major costs, not unexpectedly, being computer systems and transition management. Now, it's a far cry from the hundreds of millions that people have heard of. These are independent reports, while the communities proposing the deamalgamations believe they can do it for less than that. The larger amalgamations, like the Inner West, in Queensland, the Noosa, which was 30,000 people out of 160, had a cost in today's costs of about $4.7 million to deamalgamate. Again, far different from the figures that you've heard. And again, computing and transition costs were the main costs. So that's really the base cost for the larger councils. And now, looking at the Inner West and Canterbury Bankstown, the flawed methodology in these proposals was one of totally recreating the systems and organisations of 8 years ago. And the total cost figures should not be considered, as that proposal is too high risk to implement and very disruptive to the employees. Imagine saying to staff today, what we're going to do is go backwards 8 years and start again with new councils. The methodology that's proposed here is that one of moving forward from the amalgamated organisation that works today, keeping the same policies and procedures and systems for 3 years until the new councils settle down. And this reduces the risks. And of course, we can share services. There's no reason why all services have to be provided by all councils. I've worked for organisations where the computer systems are run in another country for Australia. There is absolutely no reason why you need 3 payroll systems for 3 councils. It is madness. And the accounting systems work at the moment, so we should build on what we've got, not try and go back to what existed 8 years ago. It's also important to remember the staff, as this methodology of moving forward would mean the staff would stay in the same job and perhaps move to a different council, but have less disruption, less risk, and less loss of expertise. So that's the methodology that we've used to cost out what we think an amalgamation would cost. Now, based on the Queensland costs, reduced redundancy because we're having shared systems, looking at transition costs from Ernst & Young, and looking at the assets and software tied up in computing, we think the maximum cost for a council the size of the Inner West for deamalgamation would be at the order of $10 million. Now that might seem a lot, but it's a lot of organisation, there's a lot to be done. But it's a far cry from the figures of 30-odd million and hundreds of millions that have been quoted in the press. So it's a figure. And remember, of course, that the government gave grants of $10 million and $15 million to every amalgamated councils. So this is not a cost that is out of the reach of a government. So it will cost some money, they'll be the one-off costs, and they're the costs that the government have to pick up. Now, the claim for ongoing costs that were made in the Inner West, that means that you'd have hundreds of millions of costs to the government, is just not credible. It is made to try and inflate the costs and make people scared of the amalgamation. If communities vote to be merged, they'll need to make themselves sustainable. And if the ones I talk to, the councils I talk to, the communities there are determined that they can do better than a merged council. Now, the bill proposed, that we've proposed, Amanda's proposed, has regulations like They were used in the Queensland Deamalgamation, and councillors continued to run the council with an independent transition manager employed. The Office of Local Government will prepare a standard template for the methodology of shared services and splitting the costs. I've spoken to Angus Gordon, who was GM when Pittwater split from Moringa about 5 or 6, 7 years ago, and he believes it's easier now with the computerised system. Now, the Inner West has shown with 62.5% that they want to demerge, and even with some increased costs. Before that poll, they were told there would be some increased costs, and you can see how much democracy means to you. You are prepared to bear some initial costs to get the right back to control your own costs. Now, we need to get the support of the Labor and all the opposition to succeed. Let's not fool ourselves. We need to get their support, and you can help by supporting the Residents for Deamalgamation and emails out to ministers. The ministers and the Labor Party and the opposition have to understand that the community are behind this. They have not forgotten. And you can sign up to the Residents for Action Network over at the table over there. So join, help us to get this going, and send emails to the Minister and to your local member, and let's make sure that everybody understands that we communities will not give up until we put the local back into local government.